Hello, good afternoon. My name is Hellen, and with me today we have Patricia. We would like to thank very much the British Council for the wonderful opportunity to be here talking to you today about Beyond Grades, Rethinking Assessment to Empower Learners and Institutions. Say hi, Patricia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Patricia. Ellen and I are going to talk about assessment and how to empower learners and institutions. Okay, Helen? So, to start, we'd like to reflect on what's your definition of assessment? What is
Think,
assessment for
think
you?
about that, yeah, for a
Hmm.
moment. What is
Yeah.
assessment? Okay, we cannot waste too much time here, so let's move on.
Okay, as teachers, we carry out assessment. We have to measure the performance of our students and the progress they make, right? We also need to diagnose the problems they have and provide our learners with useful feedback. So, to summarize this, what Harris and Mecken said, we have this thing of effective assessment is not just about assigning grades. Yes, it's also about understanding where our students are in their learning journey. Yes, and when we measure assessment, when we measure their performance, we diagnose their difficulties and we give them meaningful feedback. We empower students to improve, yes, their abilities. Okay, Ellen?
Not to mention the relevance of needs analysis, as Harris and McCann say here.
All right. So in this session, we are discussing the difference between two types of assessment. So we have summative assessment and formative assessment. So we are going to discuss how teachers and institutions can reflect, can rethink assessment to support real learning. Okay, what can we do as teachers to support our students? What can we do as schools, language schools, as, to support our learners to achieve their goals, of course?
Considering what Harris and McCain have just told us. Okay, so it's very important to begin with the difference between summative and formative assessment. To start, the summative assessment, which is the far most common one, schools, teachers, language institutions, etc., work with this kind of assessment. As the definition says here, it aims to measure students' performance at the end of a period of study. So keep that in mind. It's also called achievement test. Some examples of this sort of assessment would be final exams, placement tests, and standardized tests such as TOEFL, IELTS, other Cambridge exams, Michigan, etc. This, as I said, is the most common assessment used by most people because it's very good for certification. So if you have to prove someone, oh, this is the level you currently possess, standardized tests and summative assessment is the ideal. It's also very good in terms of accountability. So if you're working for an institution, let's say an English school or even a regular school, you probably have to talk to your stakeholders about your results. So hence the strength of this kind of assessment. But on the other hand, this sort of assessment doesn't always reflect the language growth. It's not always what students actually can do in the language. For example, we have cases like Japan or even Brazil, where we are from, where people excel at written tests, but that doesn't mean they can speak the language at all. On the other hand, we have formative assessment, and I don't have to tell you, this is our favorite. But I don't mean to convince you to necessarily use formative assessment. The goal here is to show you tools. So this is the kind of assessment that feeds back into learning. It is an ongoing sort of assessment because it constantly gives information to both the teachers and the learners on the progress they're having. That's why this is also called the progress test. Some of examples of these are self-assessment, peer feedback, reflective journals, and of course, whenever we as teachers are observing and giving feedback, this is a sort of formative assessment tool. We're going to talk a bit more about that. But as a pro, we encourage learners to keep learning. So it's not about learning to take a test, just to sit for an exam. You are constantly seeking to improve your performance as a learner and, of course, as teachers. On the other hand, because they are not so standardized, they require consistency, and novice teachers might struggle with this sort of assessment.
Exactly. Of course, as Ellen said, our favorite one is the formative assessment. Yes, in which that's because we can reflect on our teaching, we can reflect on our students' mistakes, but we understand that at times it's not possible for people to use whatever they want to. So we need to rethink assessment for students and institutional growth in the sense of giving an idea and having an idea of the possibilities that we have with what we have. And so the limitations of traditional assessment in tracking students' progress, it's a common thing in our scenario as teachers. Yes, and this is and why does this happen? Yes, institutions they need to prove, as they need to show a result. Yes, but it is possible, yes, to align assessments with learning goals. So it is possible to have a formative approach. Even though you don't have a formative assessment at the end of a period or along the period, actually, it's possible to use formative assessment yes, in your approach. Yes, so we have some practical strategies. Yes, formative techniques. What can you do in case you work at a regular school and you need to give grades by the end of a period? You can use formative techniques, feedback loops, checklists, progress tracking. A very good thing that we have nowadays is AI and digital tools, as we can use technology to help not only our progress, not only to develop lessons, design lessons, but also to make students understand how they assess themselves. As there is also the performance-based tests, as that when we use real-world application to assess language skills. So if I work with teenagers, yes, if my students are teenagers finishing high school and they aim to go abroad and they want to take an a course in another country, my goal will be different from if I have students in a private school, a language school, and then they are business people. So we need to use real world applications to assess students according to their goals. Okay.
Exactly. And that's why we brought you an example of something we do here at Higher Up. Because we're talking about rethinking assessment, so it's worth understanding how to actually do it in practice. This is a sort of formative assessment cycle. It always starts at the beginning of each lesson with an entrance ticket, and I'm going to give you some more examples of this in a moment. But what is the idea here? We want to recap what the students have already learned. We want to we want to grasp what students have already learned. We want to remind them of what they have learned, considering, for example, the spaced retrieval technique that it tells us that we need to remind them of what they have learned, so this knowledge can uh, stick to their brains. So the idea here of the entrance ticket is to help them remember to bring the knowledge back. So that's why it's at the beginning of each lesson. Then we have the lesson as usual. after the lesson is over, we have the feedback at the end of each lesson, as I said. So this here at Higher Up, this is done with VIP students and with groups as well. But we are working with small groups. We work with groups of maximum 4 learners. So it's very easy to give individual feedback at the end of each lesson. However, that doesn't mean if you work for a regular school with 30, 40 students, you can't give feedback. Of course you can. You can walk around the class, take notes, and then go to the board and write down some of the examples you heard, whether they're good examples or things that they needed to work on. It doesn't matter. We also like very much to focus on pronunciation issues because here at Higher Up, we consider ELF, English as a lingua franca. So we are always aiming at intelligibility with our learners. Then after the feedback, we always have an exit ticket. And that is now to recap what we have studied in this lesson. And it's very interesting to ask them questions such as, what have you learned today? Because sometimes you're teaching them, you're trying to teach them, because we know students don't necessarily learn what we are teaching. So, for instance, we have had a case of teaching functional language, and throughout the lesson, somebody asked, how can I say the equipment you put on a horse to ride a horse? Oh, it's a saddle. Okay, great. And then you ask at the exit ticket, what have you learned today? The functional language? Not really. The saddle. Everybody remembers the saddle.
Vocabulary. Yes.
Yes. So that
Remarkable vocabulary.
exactly. Why
Mhm.
are they going? What are they going to use that for? I have no idea. But that remain that got into their brains. So the exit ticket teaches us how to be humble, but it
Mhm.
also let us have a better idea of what they actually learned. So I'm going to show you now what our feedback looks like. As I said, good examples. So this is an example we do with an individual lesson. So this is a VIP lesson. We write down good examples of things they said. We write down things that they should work on because it's wrong and nobody will understand it, or because it's a recurrent mistake. As I said, the pronunciation issues. So, for instance, here we have here spend versus expand. That's something the learners struggle with, consider intelligibility, and the suggestions. So here are things that they said that they do make sense, but they could say them better, or it's a way to expand their vocab. So, for example, impossible to change, written on stone. She didn't know this, and that's why this example is here. So this is an example of our feedback. And this is done with groups as well, but you don't have to follow exactly this. You can tailor it to your reality. And as I mentioned, the entrance and exit tickets, oh, very important. These are very brief. They take like 5 minutes tops, okay? And they're very good if you're waiting for other students to do them. So you could bring an image that is related to the lesson, of course, and what words or phrase do you associate with it? What's something you've recently learned that stuck with you from past classes? What do you remember about last class topic? We also like to ask them to take a look at their list of vocab that they build on their own and say, hey, what is something from that list of vocab that you want to bring back, etc. And also exit tickets, write down 3 new words you learned in today's lesson. On a scale of 1 to 5, how confident do you feel about today's lesson topic? And how will you use what you learned today outside of class?
Yes, it's very important to understand not only our students' process of learning, but the way that they feel when it comes to feedback. When we talk about feedback, we usually use the holistic approach in which we understand the students' struggles and they should not only the students' needs, but also the students' struggles. Yes. So the way that we approach them, and we show them not only their mistakes, but when we start talking about their progress, the things that they have been doing well, they feel that they are really learning. So when it comes to formative assessment, we need to watch out to take care of this thing of just trust the process, because at times students, as human beings as we are, we need words of reinforcement saying, "Oh, you are doing well. Yes, so you are good at this, you're good at grammar, you're good at pronunciation, but we need to work on your listening." So don't focus just on what students don't know how to do or on their difficulties. Otherwise, it is something that may backfire. Yes, as a learner, yes, I have just started learning playing tennis, and I have this experience with my instructor. My instructor is likely to tell me all the bad things that I do, and at times I don't know if I'm really learning because I don't have positive reinforcement. And as a teacher, it's a very good thing for me to see how I struggle, yes, and how I am, the type of learner that I am, because I put myself in my students' shoes. So when we talk about assessment, we also talk about support. Assessment is to support learning, as not to measure it. Yeah, so it reinforces the idea that assessment is a tool for growth. It's not a tool just to grade and to give. I shouldn't just a grade at the end of a semester and say, "Oh, you are a 10 or you are a 7." We don't know what that person as a human being has been through. So you as a teacher understand and know your student. You know that his or her progress. And we know that at times life happens and people don't do well because of a personal problem or because of any other thing. So we focus on formative assessment when it because we believe in progress, we believe in reflecting not only our reflection from the teacher, but also we teach our students, we guide them to achieve autonomy. So we think of formative assessment as a way of fostering students' progress. Yes, and of course, students can refine their syllabi for better learning outcomes.
Exactly. And just to finish, always consider that if your students' affective filter is high, as Crashing says, if they feel under pressure like Patricia, the chances are they are not going to learn how to play tennis. So we have the washback effect when students don't
Mhm.
learn, and as she said, it backfire. So that's our message here today. Thank you
Mhm.
very much for your attention, and we are ready to answer your questions.